German climate pavilion at COP29 in Baku. Germany. Climate solutions, fast and fair.
Hallo zusammen und herzlich willkommen an alle.
Good morning, a warm welcome to everyone at the press conference with State Secretary Morgan from the Federal Foreign Office and State Secretary Flasbarth from the Development Ministry. My name is Manuel Metscher, press spokesperson for the Federal Foreign Office. We will now have a statement from Jennifer Morgan, and then a statement from Jochen Flasbarth, and then there will be an opportunity to ask questions. Jennifer Morgan has to leave early, so if you have any urgent questions to her, pose those first, and after that we can take questions to State Secretary Flasbarth. Right. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. We're midway through the first week of the Conference of the Parties, and this week some basics have been put in place for ambitious progress on mitigation and a new approach on climate finance. Today is Finance Day on our meet at the COP. So let me start by giving you some info on the finance situation. We need a new approach on climate finance. This is what we're working for at the COP. Developing countries' needs are in the trillions, and it is clear that such an amount cannot be provided primarily from public funding. Rather, private investment has to be brought to the table. And we are also talking about a huge development and growth opportunity. Sustainable supply chains and new economic relations and access to affordable food for billions of people is also on the table here. To that end, all financial players need to do their part. The high-level panel of experts report presented by Professor Nick Stern in Baku today showed this. Developing countries are facing very different challenges. Public funding is needed in some places, private investment in others, and in view of the dramatic cost, the viable costs of renewable energies means that this can be financed from private investment in many cases. Our Green Guarantee Group has moved forward on this, and we have a lot of talks about this at the COP. However, everybody has to put in place an enabling environment for private investment, including the developing countries, by putting in place the right environment in terms of regulatory provisions and their climate plans to give investors certainty about where they're headed. This also goes for multilateral development banks and bilateral donors. We still see that public funding is leveraging private investment, and we want to reflect today's economic realities and not those of 1992. So all countries that are economically able should contribute to climate finance. We have seen that some countries with strong financial resources have been thinking about ways in which they can contribute to climate finance. For instance, China's Vice Premier Ding Wanchun yesterday on Tuesday said at COP29 that since 2016 China has provided 177 billion renminbi, about 46 billion US dollars, $3 billion a year over 8 years. And for the first time, he called this an amount for the financing of climate projects. This is an important small step, but important questions remain open. What flows have been counted in this? The quality of funding is also unclear at present, but it shows that China can make a big difference and is already doing quite a bit. But Only those things will be counted that are reported transparently. Reporting, creating transparency is an important building block in this new climate finance approach, which we want to create at the COP. On the other hand, we need to see a stronger role of the private sector. We want a stronger investment target, especially for investment in developing countries. The climate negotiations cannot solve everything. So we also want to send a signal to financial players to think about necessary reform steps in the international finance architecture and about an enabling environment at the national level. And I'm sure that State Secretary Flasbarth will be saying more about the multilateral development banks. But in Baku, the banks have committed themselves and have expressed their commitment to their task of providing more funding, not least in view of the strong efforts by including the development ministry for an MDB reform. Yesterday, the High Ambition Coalition had a press conference. President Heine from the Marshall Islands provided leadership, and I think this was a very important moment. We met last morning, and I think we are all very agreed that we need an ambitious COP29 and need to work for that, and for a fair new climate finance approach. Jochen Flasbarth.
Thank you very much. There's just a few I'd like to add to what colleague Jennifer Morgan just said. I'd like to recall why we are talking about climate finance at all. That's the logic of the Paris Agreement. Different from what we did before, the other agreements before Paris. We agreed now in the Paris Agreement that the whole world would work together to move towards carbon neutrality. So each and everyone, all countries need to achieve climate neutrality. And the logic next step in this approach was that the poorer countries said, well, wait a moment, you guys have much higher emissions right now, and the historic emissions are a lot higher. So if you want that we also move towards climate neutrality in a short time, you need to support us. And that is true even today. Sometimes I'm asked, as the State Secretary for Development Cooperation, why are you doing things with India? Well, the explanation is not complicated, because Germany has a 6 to 7 times per capita emission compared to India, 6 to 6 times higher. So it's the rationale for our cooperation that is driving us. And what is true with regard to India, of course, is even more true with regard to small island states and other vulnerable countries who have a very low per capita emission rate. So the most important moments at climate negotiations were when the most vulnerable joined forces with those who recognized their responsibility as industrialized countries, high-emitting countries, and then got negotiations moving. Often negotiations are marked by big rifts which we need to overcome. So I think the German delegation under the leadership of the Federal Foreign Office is moving in a good direction to strengthen these bridges. The funding that Germany is providing, 6 billion, we even exceeded our promise in 2023. In 2022, we exceeded it, and we're close to meeting it for 2023. Now, both of us are regularly asked by other countries, other governments, how will things move forward for us? Well, let me be clear. I can't imagine anything else than that democratic parties in the German parliament will stand by the commitments made by a Christian Democratic Chancellor or the Social Democratic Chancellor. So we will continue to be a reliable partner. Germany will continue to be a reliable partner in climate finance. Now, with regard to what my colleague said on the banks, there's something I want to add. The 100 billion have been exceeded in 2022 by something like 115 billion. Something that is maybe not that known is that the largest part of that is contributed by the development banks. That was 47 billion in 2022. And that was before Minister Svenja Schulze, together with Janet Yellen, and with a lot of support from us in Germany and other countries, started a reform of the World Bank, which is now pushing biodiversity and global public goods. Now, the 47 billion in 2022 do not reflect these reforms yet. So now the banks were able here to announce that they will increase these funds by 2030 to 120 billion. And that is an important key for us in how we can move forward with climate finance. My last point, in Germany and in some of your media, we've read that a 2.4 billion bomb. No, it's million. I'm getting confused with trillions, billions, and millions. So 2.4 trillion is what we're talking about. The bomb, the 2.4 trillion bomb has exploded. Now, I think it's important that Germany or other countries do not get the impression that these funds have to be mobilized by taxpayers. That's not the case. A part is from taxpayers' money, of course, but the larger part needs to be contributed by financial markets. We need to ensure that in future it has to be profitable for companies to invest in climate-friendly development. That's what we need to reduce emissions. Now, companies need the right incentives so that we have these billions available. Now we have about 5 minutes left before the State Secretary Morgan has to leave, so let's take a few questions. Lucas Fuhr, FAZ. France is not sending any ministers to Baku after Aliyev made very unfavorable comments, and Argentina has said it will withdraw its delegation. That's not a good sign for multilateralism, is it? Well, we're here to accelerate international climate action. That's a goal that Germany, France, and the EU share. In the lead up to the COP, the EU agreed on a joint position, and as the EU, we will work to ensure that this COP is a success. Of course, we took note of the withdrawal of the Argentinian delegation. And of course, we regret that the delegation is leaving COP so early. But the negotiations will continue. And in the coming 2 weeks, Germany will continue to work to make COP29 a success.
Purnima, an independent journalist. Once the U.S. Goes out of the Paris Agreement, can the EU and China work together to fill the leadership vacuum? Or, given the protectionism against Chinese clean tech, is there a problem working together in this front?
So the European Union is here with a very strong positioning. We are well on the way to our decarbonization goals. Our heads of state last week just reconfirmed we are working hard and making excellent progress towards being the first climate neutral economy and continent. As part of our competitiveness strategy, we will move forward with that, and we will continue to work with the United States on the national level and also on the subnational level wherever possible. And of course, we work also with China and many other countries. That nothing in that changes. We know the urgency that we have on the climate crisis, but we also see the opportunities that are there for our citizens across Europe, the jobs that are there, the opportunities abroad, and that's our focus.
Hi, Zia Weiss from Politico. Just a follow-up question on President Aliyev's speech. Do you not think that his rhetoric might be endangering the fragile diplomacy that's happening here? And related to that, what kind of role is Europe's colonial past playing at these negotiations?
I think, as I was saying, I mean, we're here now negotiating. The COP president needs to play a bridge-building role. That is where we are at. That is what we are now doing. We are deeply committed to getting outcomes here. That is the focus. And I think certainly Germany, and I'll give the floor to Jochen Flasbarth, we work very closely with countries all around the world on eye level, working to hear their priorities and how we can move forward for a more just, climate resilient world.
No, in a nutshell, the presidency can rightfully expect from all member states here present that everybody plays a constructive role. And member states can expect from a presidency to provide neutral spaces and work on bridge building processes, just as Jennifer Morgan mentioned.
Weitere Fragen?
Are there any more questions?
Und gerne auch auf Deutsch natürlich.
And of course you can ask them in German if you wish.
Hi, sorry, English. Kenza from the Financial Times. Will Germany seek to build a coalition of countries pushing others to stay in the Paris Agreement ahead of the US's likely exit?
First of all, we're all here. We're working with the existing US administration to have a good outcome here. And everything that I have heard, I think that we have heard since we have been here, has been about the implementation and acceleration of the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement is the framework we have all agreed to, is the framework we have had in place for some time now, is resilient, brings these kind of clarity moving forward. And I think we're seeing and hearing from the International Energy Agency how much the energy transformation is moving forward. 85% of new power plants renewable, 2 times as much investment in renewables as in fossil fuels. This is an unstoppable economic plan. I think the question is the time, how quickly we need to be doing more. We're not in line yet with the 1.5 limit that scientists and the Paris Agreement holds us to, and that's what we're working to here with all parties who are present.
Hi, sorry, English again. Jake, can you hear me? Jake Biddle from Grist. Just given the apparent opposition from the G77 and China to language like the Swiss and Canadian proposals in the NCQG, I'm just wondering if you have thoughts on what a final position might look like on the question of the expanded donor base.
We're having conversations with all parties. Right now, the negotiators are working through that text in groups to be finding solutions on different parts of it. That's very good. We're in Thursday of the first week. We are here constructively engaging with others to see how we can all lift up, provide additional funding for the poorest and most vulnerable countries. And those that are able to do so and have been so prosperous over the last years, they need to come on board as well.
Das war jetzt die letzte Frage an Staatssekretärin Morgan, aber gerne weitere Fragen an Staatssekretär Flasbarth.
Auf Deutsch? Auf Deutsch oder? Okay. Verhandeln die Industriestaaten denn?
Are the industrialized countries negotiating in good faith if they do not offer a target figure for the core goal? Well, of course, it's an obvious question to ask, how much would you in the industrialized countries be willing to provide? But I think the order is wrong, and that's why the negotiation process has been set up as it is, not just for tactical reasons. It has its own logic, compelling logic, in terms of looking at financing needs and then look at what can be raised domestically, which is included in the 2.4 trillion, namely 1.4 trillion, which is the bigger portion, and what is the amount still needed in international flows? What do we think we can finance from budget funding? And then the question is, today, what is a fair share among countries contributing? And Jennifer Morgan just said, you must not overlook the fact that there are already south-south flows, even from unconventional sources, non-traditional donor countries. And it's just important to recognize this. It's a positive thing. And that will give you a basis for what we can contribute. I still haven't given you a figure, because in the negotiating logic, this will come at a later time. But it is clear that whoever has the expectation that we're talking about trillions here will not arrive at a result. Helmut Schmatze from Helmholtz Environmental Research Institute in Leipzig. Is it open to scientists? Okay, so yes, it's okay, even if he's not a journalist. First question. Article 2C is at the core of the international finance target. China rejects this idea, especially if you look at financial assistance in Article 9. But from what you said, would you say 2A is at the center? Second question, a needs-based approach like the one you describe means that the Standing Financial Committee says you only have quantified needs for 98 countries. So you just have just under half of all countries where you even know what the needs are. So how can you arrive at a target figure based on that? Well, maybe not all people here are experts. Article 2(1)(c) is about the need to create an enabling environment in all countries so that investment in climate action will be attractive. This is a discussion which was contentious in Paris for a long time because our partners in developing countries were suspicious of, they said, well, you're just trying to shift the burden to us by saying you put in place an enabling environment and then you try to get out of the picture. I think today the realization is very widespread that without an enabling environment for climate action investment, things simply will not work out. So that debate in many of our bilateral talks is not just less contentious, but even very relaxed. Of course, the topic sometimes still gets put forward again, especially in the middle of the negotiation process. And the second question, well, that's what Jennifer Morgan just explained. It's important to first get some indication of who's paying what and reaching agreement that it is good to have more figures and reporting on what is already being done. This is Thomas Hummel from Süddeutsche Zeitung newspaper. The shadow of Donald Trump is over this entire event. Aliyev said on the first day that he doesn't want to apologize for selling oil and gas. Meloni yesterday said one shouldn't have any illusions. Fossil fuels will be necessary. I think Orban said a similar thing. Do you see, what is your perception? Do you see some counter pressure pro-fossil fuels arising compared to earlier climate conferences? I think you need to distinguish between the rhetoric and what is really happening. Of course, it doesn't cheer you up to see the world burning, to see climate disasters, to see many people suffering tremendously, not just in faraway places, but even at home, most recently in Spain. And a few years ago, we had the same thing in Germany. The Japanese, the Chinese are witnessing things like that. as a policymaker with some sense of responsibility, you cannot ignore that. You have this rhetoric, which is more widespread than some time ago, to counter this understanding, but I consider this an attempt to stop the unavoidable, namely that fossil fuel is already dead. It has some future, and of course there are these efforts to still try to make that last, but if you look at the entire process, there might be a dent in the process, but it will not be reversed. And yes, the shadow of Trump is over the event. The delegation of Argentina has left. Well, there's a nice saying which all Germans know. Herbert Wehner, German policymaker, said this in 1975 in the German parliament. Those who go out will have to come back again. You cannot ignore the terrible consequences of climate change, and this comes with an imperative to act. Are there any more questions? Thank you. Marco Wilkens from Augsburg University Climate Resilience Center. At the last COP, Climate Club was an issue that was being brought forward. Do you see any indications that this Climate Club may actually work and that progress is being made on this? Is there any news on this? Because some people are saying that one of the key opportunities this year offers one of the key opportunities to still make progress on this. Well, for those journalists who want more detail on this, Stefan Haufe is over there, who's the press spokesperson for the Climate Action and Economic Affairs Ministry, which is in charge of this. I'll answer in a more general way. The Climate Club is the answer to the fact that many of our partner countries in the Global South, but also competitors in the North,
den Schutzmechanismus für unsere energieintensive Industrie in Europa als unfair ansehen.
Consider the carbon border adjustment mechanism to be unfair, and they have a feeling that this is intended to keep them from our markets. And Chancellor Scholz responded by saying, well, let's have a climate club with similar standards. Then there was some dent in the commitment behind this when the finance minister was in charge, who has been dismissed, and now it's the economic affairs minister who is in charge now, and it's gathering momentum again. I think it's the interest of our partners not to be kept out of our markets, and it's our interest to make progress on climate action.
What is the definition of climate finance for Germany? Does it include debt at market rate or above market rate? And there's been criticism about developed countries, putting conditions on climate finance. Hire our experts, take our technology. How do you respond to this?
Hi. Sibi from the Associated Press. Sir, can you tell me how the global financial structure maybe can be restructured so that countries like Colombia, which are trying to act on climate change, can get the support they need to move away from fossil fuels? And also, do you think war is taking away funding that can be used for climate action?
Okay, so very quickly, climate finance at the end is also financing for climate. What we report to the OECD and to the Secretariat as Germany regarding your question with loans is that we just, in Germany it's Schenkungsäquivalente, definitely I don't know the English word for that, but it's a difference, the advantage you get from the AAA rating financing from, for example, KfW, compared to market conditions, and that difference is accounted to our climate financing that we are reporting. Our climate finance reporting does not include the whole sum of the loan itself. And the second one, the debt situation is definitely an obstacle on the way to climate neutrality. We have to work on that. We know that the G20 framework is still not operating properly, so we have to work on the debt situation as well.
Okay, dann ganz herzlichen Dank an alle fürs Kommen. Thank you very much for coming, and thank you to you, Jochen Flasbarth. See you next time.
Welcome to the German Climate Pavilion at COP29 in Baku. Germany. Climate solutions, fast and fair.